What is the purpose of science? And by extension, in the second, as you'll see, what is the purpose of a university? That is the subject of today's episode. Hello and welcome back to Shio Sophia, your home for raw, unfiltered, informal science. I'm Adrian, climate scientist, crafter, amateur philosopher, and this is very much going to be on the philosophy end kind of today here. And I'm going to end up linking the purpose of science and the purpose of the university with this because of the article that I want to walk through that's related very much to the topic. And I actually want to walk through this through the idea of the telos. And telos is telos or telos, however you pronounce it. Telos is probably the better pronunciation. Telos comes to us from Aristotle. And, he had a lot of great things that contribute to the world that we know today and to the founding documents of the United States and a whole mess of different things. But in an argument about politics, actually, in his writings, was when Aristotle defined the idea of telos being the purpose, the intent, the end, the goal. But Aristotle was always specific and subtle, and what he really meant by it, as a reading here, is the inherent purpose, the ultimate reason for each thing being the way it was, whether it was created that way by humans or by nature. And in here they talk about examples with like a mug. Coffee mug, if you ask someone to define it, it's a container from which to drink hot beverages. Nearly everything about the mug reveals its purpose. It's too small and open to hold anything but a drink or pencils. You wouldn't want to carry gasoline in it, and it's too big for heavy shots of liquor, unless you're a heck of a drinker. I hope you're not. But the mug was made for the purpose of drinking coffee. That is its telos. Natural objects, Aristotle described it with the idea of trees. The telos was also what it was made for, which is something you can observe. So a tree seemed to be made to grow, to branch out, to make fruit, nuts, flowers, provide shade, reproduce. So that's all part of the telos of a tree. Human beings, Aristotle's actually very interesting when it comes to human beings, and it fits a lot with some of the ideas when we talk about the pursuit of happiness and Declaration of Independence. Is happiness. And Aristotle says the telos of human beings is happiness, or eudaimonia, which actually means something more like fulfillment. Fulfillment of what? Potential for excellence, virtues in English, translation of Aristotle. The word virtue in Aristotle's means the artistic, the scientific, the athletic, or any other kind of excellence. What Aristotle means when it comes to humans and their telos is a meaningful life. Your purpose on earth is to have a meaningful life, according to Aristotle. You're doing something fulfilling that fulfills some deep part of your being that gives meaning to your life. You're not just sitting on your ass playing video games all day. Although maybe you're a video gamer and you get paid to do that. Fine, I don't care. That may be your telos. It could be, not to ding that, but you have some kind of deep purpose for your life. You're contributing something back to the world. That is what Aristotle means in the telos of humans. And that's a whole argument for another day, but I think that sometimes people lose track of their telos, and that may be some of the reason we have problems here. I'm not going to dwell on this. That's not the point. What prompted me to think of this, actually, as a topic was, something going on in my own things outside of this, but also going back and reading through this essay from the Heterodox Academy by Jonathan Haidt back in 2016, where he wrote, "Why Universities Must Choose One Telos, Truth or Social Justice." And Jonathan Haidt is one of the authors of the Coddling of the American Mind, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. Please fact check me. But he had a very interesting piece, and I was thinking about it myself. Things going on in the last week in my own career and work and what have you, and thinking about, what is the telos of science? What is the ultimate purpose of science? What is the ultimate purpose of the university? And the reason I end up thinking that the university and science go into hand to hand is for a couple of different reasons here. And that's why I'm linking the two of them together, with the purpose of science and the purpose of the university. The reason I'm linking the two together here is because on the one hand, a lot of science is done at universities to begin with, and lots of professors with graduate students and students doing undergraduate students doing research and writing grant proposals and all that kind of good stuff. That happens a lot at the university. So that's one reason why. It's partly because science is done at universities, be it social sciences or physical sciences, or if you prefer, soft sciences and hard sciences. But the other reason, of course, and one of the biggest ones to me, is wherever they go from the university, the next generation of scientists, the next generation of people who will be doing the great research, scientific research on which society partly depends, well, they get their start at a university. And so it is incumbent upon the university to teach what the telos of science is. Which as you're going to find out, I agree with Jonathan Haidt here, that the telos of science should be to find the truth about any particular phenomena. In general, you're looking for the truth about something. You're getting at provisional truths. In science in general, you have to work on the notion that there is an objective truth that you are trying to find, and you get there step by step with provisional truths from each scientific study until you arrive at something that is what you think the objective truth is in this particular question or phenomena. And of course, you always leave it open to what the challenge is. So we're going to read through this, and I would invite you also, Heterodox Academy has a great new, bright new podcast online where they're actually putting old blogs like this in audio format, and this one is Heterodox Out Loud, which I've actually that's how I was introduced to this article, actually, was listening to it originally through the podcast. So I recommend going there. So let us begin with Jonathan Haidt. Aristotle often evaluated a thing with respect to its telos, its purpose and or goal. The telos of a knife is to cut. The telos of a physician is health or healing. What is the telos of a university? The most obvious answer is truth. The word appears on so many university crests, but interestingly, many of America's top universities are embracing social justice as their telos, or as a second and equal telos. But can any institution or profession have two teloses, or teloi? What happens if they are in conflict? And this is why I actually was thinking about this, like, wow, damn, yeah, if you have two different purposes, or a thing has two different purposes, are they going to come into conflict at one point, and which one do you pick? You can't necessarily have a second and equal telos, because you can run into the situation of they're going to be in complete conflict. So which one do you pick? And that's the fun thing. So if you remember the difference between science and wisdom episode, one of the things I talked about was Trofim Lysenko, and how he got so bent and considered Marxism so much more important, Marxism, socialism, communism, the ideals of Stalin, to be much more important than the truth in his case. So he basically threw science, 100 years of Mendelian genetics under the bus, and consequently, ultimately, contributed to a heck of a famine in the Soviet Union. And the deaths of a lot of scientists, actually. And that's one reason why you can't have a conflicting teloi right there, two conflicting teloi right there, because, I mean, if they come into conflict, you have to pick one. You cannot necessarily have both if they are in direct conflict with each other. If your teloi on one hand, in Lysenko's case, he wanted more Marxism, all those ideals, but he didn't want the truth, and the truth was telling him that this thing that he was thinking of, which was more in line with Marxism, didn't work. So he had direct conflict in there. He had to pick one telos to go with. He couldn't have a conflicting teloi. Let's continue. As a social psychologist who studies morality, I have watched these two teloses come into conflict increasingly during my 30 years in the academy. The conflict seemed manageable in the 1990s, but the intensity of conflict has grown since then, at the same time as the political diversity of the professoriate was plummeting, and at the same time as American cross-partisan hostility was rising. I believe the conflict reached its boiling point in the fall of 2015 when student protesters at 80 universities demanded that their universities make much greater and more explicit commitments to social justice, often including mandatory courses and training for everyone in social justice perspectives and content. Here's the thing. I immediately have a problem with these universities if you're bowing to the students, because the universities are supposed to be teaching the students, not the other way around. You are supposed to be learning while you are at a university, and yeah, you can grow to the point where you're challenging things going on at a university and, saying maybe you should incorporate this, or maybe this isn't correct, or what have you. You can do that Don't get me wrong. I just think as a college and university, as when you're there as a student, you should be learning. You shouldn't be making demands of what the university is teaching you. Anyway, necessarily. Now that many university presidents have agreed to implement many of these demands, I believe that the conflict between truth and social justice is likely to become unmanageable. Universities will have to choose and be explicit in their choice so that potential students and faculty recruits can make informed choices. Universities that try to honor both will face increasing incoherence and internal conflict. Please note, I am not saying that an individual student cannot pursue both goals. In the talk below, I urge students to embrace truth as the only way that they can pursue activism that will effectively enhance social justice. But an institution such as a university must have one and only one highest and inviolable good. I am also not denying that many students encounter indignities, including insults and systemic obstacles because of their race, gender, and sexual identity. They do, and I favor some sort of norm setting or preparation for diversity for incoming students and faculty. But as I have argued elsewhere, many of the most common demands the protesters have made are likely to backfire and make experiences of marginalization more frequent and painful, not less. Why? Because they are not based on evidence of effectiveness. The demands are not constrained by an absolute commitment to truth. And that's a good point, because actually, like I said last time in the diversity training episode, talking about the effectiveness of diversity trainings, he's actually talking about some of that here. A lot of that is not necessarily based upon evidence as much as it's based upon abstract concepts, and as such end up causing problems and being ineffective when they're actually measured objectively. And yeah, this is the thing. I mean, students can pursue multiple goals, though I do think you ultimately have personal belief and opinion myself here. You do ultimately have one big purpose for your life, one big thing that you're going to do. That doesn't mean you can't get involved in multiple things. I say it at the beginning. I am a climate scientist. I am a crafter. I'm also an amateur philosopher. There's a lot of things going on in my life. And this is one of the many things that I do. But yeah. If you're not having it based on the truth, I don't know what to tell you. If you're a scientist in particular and you're not working based on the truth, I might want to say you probably shouldn't be a scientist. But anyway, on the point there. As I watched events unfold on campus over the past year, I began formulating an account of what has been happening, told from the perspective of moral and social psychology. I was invited to give several talks on campus this fall, and I took those invitations as opportunities to tell the story to current college students at Wesley, at SUNY New Paltz, and at Duke. By the time of the Duke talk, I think I got the story worked out well enough to send it out into the world, in the hope that it will be shown on many college campuses. It's long, 66 minutes, but it is as short as I can make it. There are many pieces to the puzzle, and I had to present each one in order. Here's the talk, and an outline of additional materials are below in the talk. I encourage you to go back and watch, because I think this is a good, interesting talk. But I'm actually going to go through the outline he has below, because that actually makes the points really, really well, I think, too, if you don't have time to read it. So, but yeah, it's really interesting here, because when I think about the university, that's what I think of, or I thought of in my naive sort of way, maybe it's naive now anyway, thinking that the university should be dedicated to the truth and to teaching the truth, but also to the exploration of the truth, and to be unabashed in its exploration of the truth, to go at it, go figure it out, to explore the controversial and weird things. I'm totally fine with that. So just don't force your beliefs down my throat, which is something I don't think anybody should do. Anyway. But yeah, if you're dedicated to two different teloses and they come into conflict, like as a person, if your teloses come into conflict, you got a problem. You have to pick one. And the university in that sense is no different. You can't necessarily have two conflicting purposes and expect to be able to fill both of them as an ultimate purpose. No. Telos, when Aristotle was thinking of it, was the idea of an ultimate purpose. And the ultimate purpose of the university, and I think also of science, is to find the truth. Is truth itself, really. As much as you can get to it with evidence and data and reason and enlightenment arguments and all those kinds of things, or with just arguments generally in here. So it's the truth. But let's see what happens and whether or not you can have, at least according to Jonathan Haidt, you can have two conflicting teloi, or teloses. Teloi? Teloses? Not sure what the plural is. Anyway, for his talk. I begin with two quotations. The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point is to change it. Karl Marx, 1845. He who knows only his own side of the case knows little of that. His reasons may be good, and no one may be able to refute them. But if he is equally unable to refute the reasons of the opposite side, if he does not so much as know what they are, he has no ground for preferring either opinion. John Stuart Mill, 1859. Marx is the patron saint of what I'll call social justice U, which is oriented around changing the world in part by overthrowing power structures and privilege. It sees political diversity as an obstacle to action. Mill is the patron saint of what I call truth U, which sees truth as a process in which flawed individuals challenge each other's biased and incomplete reasoning. In the process, all become smarter. Truth U dies when it becomes intellectually uniform or politically orthodox. And that's a good point to make in here. It's just like he is describing a lot of what Marx's thoughts were about power structures and privilege and, bourgeoisie and the proletariat overthrowing the bourgeoisie in there. But yeah, and it's a very important thing is that if you are, as a scientist, you have to have divergent opinions. You have to have divergent worldviews in there, because how are you knowing that you're getting at the truth? If you're only looking at a question from one angle, then you're seeing the truth through one lens and interpreting it in perhaps a flawed way. But when you get to the intellectually diverse and the viewpoint diversity that you need working within science, then you can actually get to the point of having serious looking at the truth, asking the questions from different reasoning, challenging each other, going after this thing. Well, what about this thing over here? Did you think of that? Did you think of that? Did you think of that? Getting insight from divergent viewpoints is extremely important when it comes to finding the truth. But if your goal is about power structures and privilege, the truth can be a heck of a hindrance to that. So this is the thing, and why I was saying, it's like, why I think what he's getting at here is that that's why you can't necessarily have two completing teloses or teloi. Again, I don't know what the plural is. I'm confused. I don't know what the plural of telos is here. I think it's teloses, but we'll roll with it. Each profession or field has a telos. Fields interact constructively when members of one field use their skills to help members of another field achieve their telos. Example: Amazon, Google, and Apple are businesses that I love because they help me achieve my telos, finding truth, as a scholar. But fields can also interact destructively when they inject their telos into other fields. Example: business infects medicine when doctors become business people who view patients as opportunities for profit. I will argue that some social justice sometimes injects its telos of achieving racial equality and other kinds into other professions, and when it does, those professionals betray their telos. This is why I brought up the previous episode of Shia Sophia here with Trofim Lysenko and the discussion of science and wisdom, because that's what happened with Trofim Lysenko. He got so infected with the Marxism telos, the desire to overthrow structures and change power structures and get rid of privilege and all this kind of stuff. That's not the right phrasing for that, but he got so obsessed with the Marxism kind of there, he betrayed the telos he had as being a scientist, and the scientist telos, primary one there, alongside the university, is finding the truth. As a scholar, it's finding the truth. A consistent finding about human reasoning. If we want to believe X, we ask ourselves, can I believe it? But when we don't want to believe a proposition, we ask, must I believe it? This holds true for scholars, too, with these results. Scholarship undertaken to support a political agenda almost always succeeds. A scholar rarely believes she was biased. Motivated scholarship often propagates pleasing falsehoods that cannot be removed from circulation, even after they are debunked. Damage is contained if we count on institutionalized disconfirmation, the certainty that other scholars who do not share our motives will do us a favor of trying to disconfirm our claim. But we can't count on institutionalized disconfirmation anymore because there are hardly any more conservatives or libertarians in the humanities and social sciences, with the exception of economics, which has a mere 3-to-1 left to right-wing ratio. This is why Heterodox Academy was founded, to call for the kind of diversity that would most improve the quality of scholarship, at least if you embrace Mill rather than Marx. And this is very true of the humanities and social sciences. There's very few conservatives in both. That's not as much of a problem with STEM fields like where I am in climate science. It's not to say that there's to be honest, I don't know the exact numbers. In STEM fields, it hasn't really been conducted all that much to say what it is left to right with conservatives and libertarians versus progressives and liberals in STEM fields. So no one knows that for sure, but it would still be a concern because I think he is quite right. Usually, I mean, you could count on people giving you a contradictory view or doing somebody doing the work of trying to disconfirm what you've made a claim on, but that's not a guarantee anymore. It really isn't right now, and that's a concern for me, again, because the truth needs people to try and prove our claims false. It's strange. You need to show that something is probably true. You need somebody to be able to try and prove it false, who very much thinks it's probably false and is willing to do the work to actually try and disprove a claim. Humanity evolved for tribal conflict. Along the way, we evolved a neat trick: our ability to forge a team by circling around sacred objects and principles. In the academy, we traditionally circled around truth, at least in the 20th century, and not perfectly. But in the 21st century, we increasingly circle around a few victim groups. We want to protect them and help them and wipe out prejudice against them. We want to change the world with our scholarship. This is an admirable goal, but this new secular form of worship of victims has intersected with sociological trends to give rise to a culture of victimhood on many campuses, particularly those that are the most egalitarian and politically uniform. Victimhood culture breeds moral dependency in the very students it is trying to help. Students learn to appeal to third parties, administrators, to resolve their conflicts rather than learning to handle conflicts on their own. And this is a thing true with science also. You're going to have people who disagree with you, and you're teaching people to appeal to third parties instead of figure out how to resolve their conflicts. So, hey, that's a total aside here, not necessarily relevant. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Nietzsche was right, and Nissim Taleb's book, Anti-Fragile, explains why. Kids need thousands of hours of unsupervised play and thousands of conflicts and challenges that they resolve without adult help in order to become independently functioning adults. But because of changes in American child rearing that began in the 1980s, and especially because of helicopter parenting that took off in the 1990s for middle class and wealthy kids, they no longer get those experiences. Instead, they are enmeshed in a safety culture that begins when they are young and now is carried all the way through college. Books and words and visiting speakers are seen as dangerous, even as forms of violence. Trigger warnings and safe spaces are necessary to protect fragile young people from danger and violence. But such a culture is incompatible with political diversity, since many conservative ideas and speakers are labeled as threatening and banned from campus and the curriculum. Students who question the dominant political ethos are worn down by hostile reactions in the classroom. This is one of the core reasons why universities must choose one telos. Any institution that embraces safety culture cannot have the kind of viewpoint diversity that Mill advocated as essential for the search for the truth. And this is a very true thing, because it's just like, if you think of it now, you might be called something foul. You might be called racist just for disagreeing with somebody on a university campus now. And that's kind of concerning, because that doesn't help you find the truth. It just shuts down the conversation. It shuts down any possibility of doing discussions. And that's not helpful. And I sure as heck hope, and this is something that I'm worried about, is that, this kind of thing of wanting to shut down conversation just by calling someone probably the most foul name in the book, or saying that it's dangerous if someone has a different opinion from you, that's not going to help. That's not good for science in the long run either, because science is essentially in search of the truth. That is the telos of science. Again, like the university, is the search for the truth. And that's the problem, is that you can't... There's no such thing as blasphemy when you're looking for the truth, because bad ideas get refuted and not punished. But if you're if you're dealing with social justice as being your telos, then yeah, okay, there are many things with blasphemy. There's things you can't say. There's theories and facts and authors you can't use anymore. And that's a problem. Again, like I said, that's a problem. This makes it difficult to do good social science about politically balanced topics. Social science is hard enough as it is without big, complicated problems resulting from interacting causal forces. But at social justice many of the most powerful explanatory tools are simply banned. Here's the thing. he's talking about social science here. I science in general, the purpose is for it to find the truth. We're talking about this. But part of the reason I'm bringing this up and going this deep is because of the issue that, hey, if you're not allowed to go and explore different things, if there's things that are off limits, you can't go find the truth anymore because you're being told what the truth is instead of searching for it, instead of finding it, instead of asking questions and answering questions. And this social science, I can see that it's already a problem for them. I'm worried about what's getting into the physical sciences, in particular, as we're starting to have more questions that involve interdisciplinary related research. So social sciences interacting with physical sciences, and then it starts making for some very interesting and challenging problems when some of the same kinds of ideas end up trickling into the physical sciences. What can't you talk about in the physical sciences? I mean, come on, with cloud formation and the climate and, geological features and things like that. It's going to be challenging if that gets into the social physical sciences. Excuse me. All social sciences know that correlation does not imply causation. But what if there's a correlation between a demographic category and a real-world outcome? At Social Justice U, they teach you to infer causality, systemic racism, or sexism. I show an example in which teaching leads to demonstrably erroneous conclusions. So what he's talking about here is the idea that you're ignoring, it's basically a logical fallacy to say that correlation implies the causation of something. These two things are correlated, therefore this is the cause. No, that's not true. You're just showing that there's a relationship. You got to figure out what the cause is. You got to figure out the why behind that relationship. At Truth University, in contrast, they teach you that disparate outcomes do not imply disparate treatment. Disparate outcomes are an invitation to look closely for disparate treatment, which is sometimes the cause of disparity and sometimes not. Truth, again, is important here because if you're just inferring causality and you're not looking for what the truth is, well, congratulations, you're making more problems than anything. And that is not the goal of science. The goal of science is the truth. So which one do you want if you're actually going to get the truth? Are you going to infer and just take a guess at what the truth is behind a problem? Or are you going to search for it? Are you going to do the experiments? Are you going to try and find the answers? I would prefer to do the latter myself. There seem to be two major kinds of justice that activists are seeking: finding and eradicating disparate treatment, which is always a good thing to do and which never conflicts with the truth. I agree. If there's disparate treatment, get it out. Doesn't belong in science, in the university, end of sentence. Finding and eradicating disparate outcomes without regard for disparate inputs or third variables. That does cause a problem. And all of it is in conflict with the truth because really you're going to have disparate outcomes because people are not people don't have the same talents and abilities as each other. It's just the way it is. I'm a talented glass artist. Doing a great job as a climate scientist, or at least I hope so. I'm pretty sure I'm doing good off the papers published and things like that. But that doesn't mean that's for everybody. It doesn't mean somebody who comes in from somewhere else. I would have a horrible outcome as a mechanic because I don't have any skill in that. Those kinds of things. In the real world, there are many disparities of inputs, but anyone who mentions such disparities on campus is guilty of blasphemy and must be punished. I worked through an example. Okay, this is in part of the talk there. Schism. And this is the conclusion here. Given the arguments made in sections 1 through 7, I think it is clear that no university can have truth and social justice as dual teloses. Each university must pick one. I show that Brown University has staked out the leadership position for Social Justice U, and the University of Chicago has staked out the leadership position for Truth U. I close by urging students on every campus in America to raise this question among themselves. Which way do you want the university to go? I offer a very specific tool to raise the question, Heterodox University Initiative. If students on every campus would propose these three specific resolutions to their student government, perhaps as a basis of a campus-wide referendum, then students could make their choice known to the faculty and administration. The students would send a clear signal that they want more or less viewpoint diversity on campus. At the very least, a campus-wide discussion of Marx versus Mill would be a constructive conversation to have. So he's making a point here that, hey, students need to decide this and what signal they want to send to the university. I would also argue that the university has to make its own decisions here. And, I would hope that a university would be after the truth. And science should be after the truth more than anything else. I'm not talking specifically about, what's in here, truth versus social justice, but if you have two competing teloses, two competing purposes, and remember ultimate purpose in the phrasing of Aristotle, eventually those are going to come in conflict, and you have to pick one. And for science, where it's so much of the research that we do now is so important to society and forming a policy and any number of different things, if there is a competing telos here, and the one that, and you're having that argument with science, and the one that doesn't come out on top, if finding the truth doesn't come out as the most important telos, when you're talking about science and all of its implications for society and what have you, I shudder to think what would happen. What would happen to research and how biased research might become. This is in terms of I'm not speaking of any one particular political side here. My thing is that if you are good in sticking to the scientific method and opening your results up for critique and all this kind of stuff, and things like that, you can be from left, from right, from anywhere in the world. Anyone can do science. That's really what it is. Anyone can do science. Stick to the method, try and be as objective as you can, try and check your own biases, and open yourself up for the criticism that, hey, maybe you didn't think of doing an analysis this way or that way because, of whatever predisposed thing you have, or maybe you just thought you're more pragmatic like I am, so you go for the simple approach instead of a more complicated analysis sometimes, and that sometimes it doesn't work that way, and you'll get pointed out to you. It happens to me. But you can't have, I don't think you can, just on a personal level, not just with respect to science, you can't have two competing teloses for your life. Two competing ultimate purposes. You can have multiple goals in your life. I'm not saying don't. I mean, you have a goal. I have a goal to sell a lot of stuff in the shop with stained glass. I have a goal to get like 3 or 4 papers published, hopefully in the next year or so. At least that, if not more, hopefully more. But those two things don't conflict with each other. But if it were truth, if my ultimate telos was finding the truth as a scientist, but I also had this telos over here of spreading some garbage ideology that was not dedicated to the truth at times, or most of the time, you might start with a telos that doesn't come in conflict with the truth. But then what do you do when they do? Do you see what I'm saying? You can't pick more than one telos for a field, for a scientific field, for a discipline. You cannot pick that. And for me, the truth when it comes to science is the most important thing, because if we are not finding the truth and giving that data and information to policymakers so that they can at least base it on the truth with respect to whatever phenomena they're interested in when they set policy. Again, I'm not saying about the telos of policymakers. They will do whatever shit they need to do. But, and sometimes often and not in line with the science at all. But anyway, if it's not the truth that you're after, and you're not willing to seek multiple diverse viewpoints and things like that to allow that truth to be brought to the fore, then I do think you're doing a heck of a disservice when it comes to science, and scientists, because you are not having good discussions and hard questions and doing all of that you need to do to find the truth. And I think basing policy, life, and things off of what might be in conflict that might be a lie, conflict with the truth that might be a lie, ends up causing more heartache than anything. So, we've seen this in history with Trofim Lysenko as the prime example. When scientists are not pursuing telos of finding the truth with respect to whatever field they've chosen, like for me, it's climate science, you are asking to cause a heck of a lot of problems. When scientists have not pursued the telos of truth, the ultimate telos of science, finding the truth, with great zeal, but have brought something else with even more zeal, another telos into science that doesn't belong there. Like he was talking about it with respect to medicine. Where was it? Up here. Oh, shoot. Where did he put it? I lost it. He was talking about it in here with respect to medicine. At one point with the different teloses, like a bit like being in medicine with business and here it is. Example: when business infects medicine, when doctors become business people who view patients as opportunities for profit, that undermines the telos. That's my point here with science. The purpose of science should be finding the truth. Purpose of a scientist with respect to whatever field they've chosen, whatever progress they work on, should be finding the truth. And it is one of the biggest things that motivates me when I do peer review, because I'm asking you, hey, did you construct this right to be able to find the truth? Are there errors and flaws in your reasoning? What does your data say what you think it says, or is there an alternate interpretation that you're not thinking of, and making sure you check to make sure that that's right? All those kinds of things come into my mind when I'm peer reviewing, when I'm doing a paper, when I'm writing a grant proposal. How am I going to get at the truth? I don't honestly care about much else when I do science myself, and that's the way it should be to me as I'm thinking about it. Because if you have competing teloses, you're all of a sudden having to choose. And if you're choosing the telos that is not finding the truth, the opposite telos, whatever that opposite telos happens to be in your life as a scientist, I shudder to think what happens with your research. And I shudder to think what happens when that research gets to others when it wasn't based on finding the truth, when it was based on doing biased results. And that is something that scares me to no end when I think of scientists who get involved in a lot of advocacy, who are more interested in having particular policies passed than whether or not those policies are based on the truth, are based on well done science that actually worked very hard to get at the truth about something, but isn't just instead more intent on motivated reasoning. And that's unfortunately a lot of things I see right now in the universities. So I am concerned that a university has fallen pretty far away from the telos of the truth, and is unfortunately taking a lot of good scientists perhaps with them. We may not know for many more years, but it's something I'm concerned about. So there's my thoughts. The purpose of science, finding the truth, and it's a bad idea when you have competing teloses. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Shia Sophia. A couple of quick announcements. Of course, I will link these two articles for you in the description, but let's see. Remember also, if you like this and you want to interact with me more, you can find me on sciworthy.locals.com. We just posted our most recent Sciworthy conversation, actually on a topic related to this one, on whether or not scientists should get involved in advocacy. So go check that out. That is only available to members of sciworthy.locals.com. Again, I will provide that link for you. You do not have to pay anything to be a member. I will point that out for you. You have to pay money if you want to be a supporter. And that is different. There are some things on the site that are only open to supporters, and I think that will be the way it is with the Sciworthy conversation soon, because we've talked about that. But you can chip in a little bit to Sciworthy. I don't make any money off of that, but it goes to support nonprofit, nonpartisan science journalism. So if you want to help good science journalism, I encourage you to go support sciworthy.locals.com. Endorsement from me and me alone with that one. Excuse me. So if you like this video, like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good jazz. Tell me what you think. What do you think is the purpose of science and the purpose of the university by extension? Because we end up training however many people we do there. And until next time, my friends, I hope you stay curious.